Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Saint-Pierre, president of C2, here in the aquarium in the middle of Movin'On. And I'm joined this morning by a great guest, Nicolas Beaumont, executive vice president of Michelin and responsible for sustainable mobility and development. Nicolas,
Good morning.
bienvenue.
Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. Sorry, I mixed up your title just there.
No problem. No problem.
Right, yeah. We've been working together for now 3 years between C2 and Michelin to create the project that is called Movin'On. Could you describe like Movin'On to an audience that doesn't know what we're trying to accomplish here?
Sure. First, I've been very happy to work with you for the last 3 years, and we know each other now, I think, very, very well. So basically, Michelin created and inspired something that is called Movin'On. And Movin'On is made of 2 different items. First, you have the Movin'On Summit, and today you and me, we are at this Movin'On Summit, and that takes place every year. And that's taken place for the last 3 years in Montreal. And during this event for 2.5 days, all the ecosystems interested in sustainable mobility gather here, share ideas, co-construct, co-build innovations, move from ambition to action to make mobility more sustainable. But this cannot happen only in 2.5 days. And that's why in parallel to the Movin'On Summit, we've got Movin'On Labs that are think tanks that operate 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and that through communities of interest, move forward on each of the topics in order that from an edition, summit edition to another summit edition, things progress and we move towards a more sustainable mobility, which means safer, greener, more efficient and more accessible. And what I must say is this summit, thanks to the creativity of C2, we're able to do something different where people meet in a different atmosphere, relax, and at the same time are extremely efficient to come up with ideas, to benchmark, to share. And I think that this combination of C2 and the Movin'On ecosystem created and inspired by Michelin is a very good cooperation.
I think, thank you for that. Florent on stage in his opening statement clearly said from thought to action, right? So the action part needs to be concrete things. So that's why the Movin'On Summit is devised in a variety of things. It's not just boring conferences where you listen to people. It's also workshops, labs, brain dates, and it's thousands of people that gather and have a dialogue about, okay, what do we do next? People actually do work by being here. How do you feel because we sometimes forget that ecosystem means people. So how many partners do we have as part of this Movin'On Summit and Lab?
So we've got more than 100 partners, between 100 and 200 partners that are really active to prepare the Movin'On Summit and the Movin'On Labs. But parallel to that, we've got hundreds of other organizations that are more knowledge partner. So for instance, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development is a knowledge partner. The World Economic Forum, Davos, is a knowledge partner. The World Bank is a knowledge partner. So we are able to gather all these people, be it cities, countries, companies, institutional organizations, NGOs that come together and are ready to exchange ideas, work. And I agree with you that the idea is not to do conferences where people sit in a passive manner and wait for time to fly. People are very active, and the idea is all the content that we produce during the Movin'On Summit, we put it online, it's going to evolve. All the experts that are gathered here have an app that they can share to go on exchanging. So for really Movin'On is a movement. It's a platform, and at the same time, it's a movement, a continuous movement towards sustainable mobility.
One thing also that is striking when you look at the partners you just talked about, they come from various industries. You know, mobility, usually we think about cars, but mobility is much broader than that, from autonomous car to changes in how city works. If I look behind us, there's one demo of an autonomous vehicle, and that vehicle involves software, hardware, even laws that need to be changed for that vehicle to move from point A to point B. And one of them is actually the result of the lab, a collaboration that happened in the lab. Are you seeing those collaboration in coming in with clear outputs? Do you have other examples of what the lab has grown and what the summit has delivered?
The summit has been very active on autonomous cars, and we see some pilots coming in. If you look at the presence of hydrogen this year, 3 years ago, it was really the beginning, and through the Movin'On summit, people interested in hydrogen were able to gather, and now we see a real example of hydrogen powered cars and buses and ships, and so the Movin'On summit really helped in bringing the people from hydrogen together. There's about all the decarbonization tools. Today, cities need to decarbonize, countries need to decarbonize, companies need to decarbonize, and sometimes they don't know how to do it. And if you want to move from ambition to action, you need to be able to give people methodologies. And year after year, we've been sharing with people these methodologies that exist. People just need to use them. And this year, again, we've seen a lot of movement towards using these tools and have decarbonization pathways, be it for countries, for cities, for companies. And that's extremely positive. The other thing we're seeing at the moment is that transportation, mobility is multimodal by essence. And you see people from the rail world, people from the sea world, people from the road world, people from the air, and everybody is working together. Also, in terms of solutions, 5 years ago, everybody was thinking, everything will be electric, and that's the end of the story, and we will have sustainable mobility. It's much more complicated than that, because if you think that everything becomes electric, okay, but then you've got, I would say, clean traffic jams in the cities. So you are not in sustainable mobility. You're still stuck, you lose time, it's not efficient. So that's number one. And it's where connected car, data, most of the computer intelligence, artificial intelligence company are here today and with the startups to share their ideas. It's extremely important. Also multimodal and multi-fuels. Electricity 5 years ago was the solution. Today, when you attend the different workshops, the conferences, the idea sharing, you find out that our future world will not be a world based on only one energy. We used to be based completely on fossil fuels. If you look at what's happening with planes now, and we heard it in the conversations, a plane could taxi with electricity, could take off with biofuel, and then could fly perhaps with solar panels. So you see a single way of being mobile could be on three different fuels. Another thing also which struck me, which is also evolving, is the question of business models and financing. Because sustainable mobility was at the beginning extremely technological, batteries, new startups with ideas, but the question of the business model behind it and the financing of it and the infrastructure was not extremely present. And more, we see that business model is part of the solution because you need to create value somewhere, and the infrastructure also. And there are very interesting discussions at the moment about who can finance that. Mm-hmm. And that's why, for instance, insurance companies are present. They are part of the Movin'On ecosystem.
Yeah, I was noticing that like everything from banks to insurance companies are here. And how do they fit in that picture?
And the way to fit in that picture, if you look at a bank, imagine you want to change the city completely and you don't want the mobility in this city to be based on cars with fuel, but on something different. Let's say bicycle, and you need to redesign completely your city. Who is going to invest? And where do you get the payback? If you look at the usual way of investing, how do the banks get their return on investment? Very complicated. Now, if you think in terms of insurance, today insurances have got very high costs because of pollution, because of the impact of pollution on the health of people. If you're changing the city to move towards slow mobility or micro mobility or non-oil powered mobility, it means that the health of people will be better because less pollution, less CO2 emission, etc., etc. In that case, it will lower the cost for the insurances. And in that case, the insurances would be ready to invest into creating these new infrastructures. So what's very interesting, what has been discussed in the different workshops, is that the financiers of tomorrow are not the financiers of yesterday. So everything is changing. The finances of tomorrow are not the finances of yesterday. The vehicles of tomorrow are not the vehicles of yesterday. The use of vehicles of tomorrow is going to be more shared and not the same of yesterday. We are moving from a product economy to a functionality economy. And that's why this summit and the labs are so important, the Movin'On Summit, because you see that everything is interconnected. A single company cannot solve the problem. And that's why I think people understand it more and more. And it's not only companies, but also countries, because you need the regulations. When you have a new prototype coming out, or you have a new fuel coming out, imagine you imagine a new biofuel. You're not allowed like this to put the biofuel into a car, because there are regulations, there are homologations. So it's where the countries, the cities, the regulatory bodies play a very important role. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they are present at the Movin'On Summit is also extremely important, because without them, nothing will happen. You'll have nice prototypes that are not allowed to be on the roads.
Yeah, we do realize, listening to you, how the complexity of this transformation, this disruption that's happening all around the world, and the summit is a great place for those conversations to happen, to make sure that we're all aligned. Just before we finish, just to align on the Movin'On Labs per se, I understand there's one that started in Europe, in Paris even, headed by Michelin. There's another one right here in Quebec that is emerging.
Yes.
Can you describe a bit more what they are and what's kind of, where do you see the roadmap on those?
So very, very clearly, these labs, when you say it's the one in Europe is facilitated by Michelin. Mm-hmm. And then we've got one in Canada. We would like to be able to have one also in Asia, because you need to have labs a little bit all over the world. And the way it works is you've got companies together who decide to work on certain topics. And around these companies, we bring cities, we bring countries, we bring universities, we bring organizations to work and to solve the problem and come up with pilots that can become a reality. That's really the objective of the lab. It's really go all year long from ambition to action, then present it at the next summit, and then at the next summit, other people share their ideas, other ecosystem come, and from there emerges another idea, perhaps another community of interest, and then things move on and on and on. So really what I hope is that for the next, I don't know how many years, there'll be a summit, a Movin'On Summit every year.
So we certainly invite everyone to join in our journey.
Yes.
Any companies that want to join and participate to the Movin'On Lab, just find us online. It's quite easy to do. And carry on the good work. It's been great living this summit with you, and the path forward certainly looks good.
Thank you, and I'm so happy to have you as a partner to bring the creativity, the atmosphere that we have every year when we meet for the Movin'On Summit. Thank you, Richard, and thank you, C2.
Thank you, Nicolas.